Hello. Welcome, everyone, to Winfield House for what promises to be a fascinating discussion about the future of sustainable fashion. Now, I always start by saying, I hope you weren't disappointed when you came here if you've been watching The Diplomat. People come in and they look disappointed because they didn't drive up. We're not on top of a big hill. We don't have a circular drive. And they're not sheep out in the meadow. But this actually is the real Winfield House. So first, once again, thank you for coming. And I want to thank Hearst and especially, where is he? My friend David Carey. David and I have been putting this together for, I don't know how long now, probably about a year. And David and I worked together when I was ambassador to France, and I'll talk about it more, but I have so much respect both for David and for Hearst Corporation. And also I want to thank Gabriela Hearst. Where is she? Well, I know she's here. There she is. For inspiring so many of us with her amazing designs and her vision. And as you can see, I have one of her on now, but it's terrible when I go to tea at Claridge's because I walk by her store and I can always not go, I have to go in because her design is so beautiful, but she's also making such a difference for the world and making the stand that she's making and what she does also politically in the United States. Really fantastic. Anyway, I also want to thank Royal Highness Princess Eugenie and Princess Nina sitting in the front row. And thank you for coming tonight. We're thrilled to have you here. And as I said, I'm a huge fan of Gabriela, fortunate to own some of her pieces. This one actually, believe it or not, given the sustainable theme, there's a competitor here, I think, but is from Real Real. So I think it's all important that we do that. And Hearst, back to Hearst, Hearst for so many years has demonstrated a real commitment to environmental stewardship, how they run their businesses, initiatives like in terms of publishing, but David will talk more about that tonight. But what Hearst really has done, and I've known them for years because I am a New Yorker, Hearst is committed to everything from renewable energy to conservation, from protecting Earth's forest to protecting Earth's waterways. And one of the first and amazing media groups, Hearst was one of the first companies also to care deeply about social responsibility. I was talking to somebody earlier tonight. I knew Frank Bennick when he was chairman, and what he kept talking about, which at the time was not really usual for corporations. What he kept talking about was what Hearst could do to improve the world. And that mattered a great deal to him, and that was the culture of Hearst. And David now really carries that torch at Hearst. And I know how much it means to him because he and I have talked about that in New York and Paris and other places. And for me, I always feel, and my staff this year has heard me say it many times, that businesses have a responsibility not just to do well, but to do good. And Hearst and Gabriela both take that social responsibility very seriously in their philanthropy, in their products, in their publications, protecting the environment, fighting climate change. They're huge challenges. We know how big they are, and they require the private sector to step up. And they also require individual consumers to make better choices. They require our governments to take bold and decisive action. And personally, I'm very proud to work for the President, President Biden, who passed the single largest investment in American history to fight climate change. But in the end, it's going to take all of us working together to make a difference. And globally, and I think sometimes we forget this, globally fashion is responsible for roughly 10% of carbon emissions, more than international flights and maritime shipping combined, which most people really don't realize. It also consumes vast amounts of water, and that means we have a big opportunity in addition to a big challenge to change. Fashion is a massive industry. I don't think I need to tell anybody in this room. It contributes 1.3 million jobs to the UK economy alone, and it's worth about $1.7 trillion globally. And that means there is a huge opportunity. Changing trends in fashion will have a major impact across the world. Fashion is such a big industry and has such cultural resonance that if people see the fashion industry changing to become more sustainable, others truly will follow. And to have companies like Hearst leading the charge with their considerable megaphone of publications and their trumpet and their respectability means that we can really make a difference. And the truth is, and Gabriela and I think were talking about this earlier, customers are already demanding change. More and more people are looking at the label and making the choice to buy ethically produced clothing. I pay attention to the fabric tag and prefer natural materials over synthetics. I try to buy vintage or secondhand. Not all. I also like to exchange clothing with my own personal fashion idol, my daughter Kate, who happens to work in fashion and is one of the highest ranking women in her company in the United States. So all of these consumer behaviors are important. How the fashion industry sources its materials, manufactures and packages its products, and manages waste. Vital for the environment. It's important, but you know what? It's good for business too, and we have to keep remembering that. So in a moment, I'm going to turn this microphone, or whatever it is, over to my friend David Carey to introduce our all-star panel of experts and how we make the fashion industry more sustainable. But before I do, I have to recognize David and Hearst once again for their commitment to creating change in the world, something that is also very important to me. Some of you may not know, but I'm only the second female ambassador in the United Kingdom in 200 years, so not the best record. And the last was 50 years ago, so yes, I am committed to change. So anyway, I've worked with David, as I said, for many, many years. And in France, when we collaborated, we did something that was very special for me. We created an internship program for women in journalism, funded by LUS, L France, and by our US Embassy. And tonight, I can announce on David's behalf that Hearst will be doing something very similar here in the UK by funding 2 brand new scholarship positions at the University of the Arts London and the London College of Fashion. This is an issue personally very close to my heart because just as I want change, I believe that change has to provide a better future for young people. And I've been working to provide young people in this job with new opportunities and new ladders so that they don't, their only thing that keeps them back are their own dreams. And a little aside, I worked with another corporation in the US, Bank of America, that I also have a lot of respect for. And we created a scholarship program in Belfast to teach young people digital skills that are in demand and make sure, once again, that the only thing that holds them back is their dreams, that they have the skills, training, and education to do whatever they want. Opening doors for the next generation of designers, leaders, entrepreneurs, like many of you in this room, is how we create a better future. So thank you again to everybody here. Thank you especially to Hearst. Thank you to Gabriela. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to David Carey.
Thank you, Jane, for really understanding the special DNA of Hearst. And how great is it to have a discussion on this important topic in this setting today? You know, the beautiful grounds, one of the great gardens any place, maybe we were talking maybe the best garden in all of London. And it's also a great day because the moon is not blocking the sun and the earth did not shake. And so there's a lot of VIPs in the room, but I think the real VVIP, of course, is the earth. And this is a topic we know it's very important to our company, important to our readers, important to our employees, and to our business partners. You know, we were excited about the event, so about a year ago, the ambassador called me about, let's kind of reprise a little bit what we did in France, but to do so with a modern twist around sustainability. And so I think maybe 6 Zoom calls between the great team working for the ambassador and our events team led by Alex Carlin, and we culminated with tonight's event. And we were excited because there's a lot about right now in this discussion that brings together the DNA of our company, and also our long-standing commitment and connection between our company in the US and in the UK. And so first, serving and supporting our communities where we operate is at the highest levels of our priorities, and few individuals can match the record of Ambassador Hartley, who for decades has worked to improve the outcome and standing of the United States during a very complex time, and also your tireless work for so many nonprofits. So you set a very high bar for all of us, Ambassador, and thank you very much. We've also been keenly focused on sustainability well before this was kind of a topic du jour. Our offices here in London are 100% powered by renewable energy with zero waste to landfill. Some of you may have been to the great Hearst Tower in New York, created by a noted British architect, Norman Foster. When the Hearst Tower opened in 2006, it was the greenest building built in New York. It remains kind of a gold standard to this day. And you might have seen on the videos, if you saw these beautiful rolling hills, a facet of our company that people don't fully appreciate is we own 200,000 acres of sustainably managed land in California. And we have, in some cases, for more than 100 years. That includes the Hearst Forest, which has 20 million trees on it. We just had it scientifically counted. And also the Hearst Ranch, which has 1 million solar modules and produces enough renewable energy to displace over 100,000 metric tons of CO2 per year. But this program also speaks to the connection between Hearst UK and Hearst in the US. William Randolph Hearst founded Hearst in 1887, 137 years ago. 23 years later, he created the National Magazine Company to start publishing our magazines around the world. And so we've been committed to this community for more than 100 years. Today, our single largest business is the Fitch Group, represented tonight by Paul Taylor, our CEO. Thank you, Paul, for joining us. And Fitch is co-headquartered between New York and London. And we proudly publish Elle and Harper's Bazaar, Good Housekeeping and Esquire here, and our global magazine company president, Debbie Chiricella, is also here, so thank you, Debbie. Tonight's discussion is led by Kenya Hunt, the editor-in-chief of Elle UK. Kenya is American. She's lived in the UK for 16 years, and she brilliantly blends style and substance every day into this great media property. Kenya also in 2021 was the recipient of the British Fashion Council's Global Leader of Change Award. So this conversation about fashion and sustainability is at the intersection of so many trends, and we're happy that you can make time to be with us, and happy, again, thank you to the ambassador for hosting us, and now my colleague, Kenya Hunt.
Thank you so much, David, for that kind and generous introduction and for the opportunity to be here with all of you today. I have to say that I am deeply honored to be here with two women who really personify change-making in action. It's a real honor to sit down with Gabriela Hearst and Caroline Rush, and I'll introduce each of them to you now. And so I want to read this because I don't want to get a word wrong. I want to make sure I get this right. So, Gabriela grew up in her family's ranch in Uruguay, where the notion of luxury meant things were beautifully made to last. This inspired her to launch her namesake label in 2015 with an uncompromising commitment to sustainability. Her runway shows have been a pioneering example of this, using dead stock fabrics and eliminating plastic use. Her work would go on to redefine the industry through a string of milestones, including her Spring-Summer 2020 collection, which was the first ever carbon-neutral runway show. To her time as creative director at Chloe, where she helped lead the European luxury house to being the first to achieve B Corp status, which was incredible. And so now her list of accolades is endless, including the International Woolmark Prize for Women's Wear, the CFDA Women's Wear Designer of the Year, and British Fashion Council's Leader of Change Award. And that list goes on and on. But most recently and notably, she received the Time Earth Award last month, which I think we should congratulate you on and give her a round of applause for. And just last week, the San Francisco Ballet premiered a female-first version of Carmen with costumes by Gabriela, so her influence goes well beyond the world of fashion. And then Caroline is the chief executive of the British Fashion Council. Since her appointment in April 2009, she has transformed London Fashion Week into a globally recognized platform for creativity and fashion. And under her leadership, the Fashion Awards has become the international awards for the industry. And it has generated millions of pounds for the BFC and its various charitable projects. Recently, the BFC launched the Institute of Positive Fashion, which I'm looking forward to discussing more with you today, as an engine room for change, galvanizing the industry to address how it can more positively impact the environment, people, and community. And Caroline sits on the UK's Creative Industries Council and is co-chair of the Circular Fashion Innovation Network and chair of the Creative Industries Trade and Investment Board. So here we have two incredibly inspiring and formidable women. And I think, for the next hour, we're just gonna have a meaningful and thought-provoking conversation exploring creative ways to collectively drive change in our industry. And as David says, it feels like quite a momentous period to be doing this as well, following the historic solar eclipse, and then also recent news of the first climate victory case in the European Human Rights Court. So lots of amazing things happening this month, Earth Month. So Gabriela, I thought we could start by just talking about your incredible origin story, because I know that your time on your family's ranch in Uruguay was quite a formative experience for you. And I'd love to just hear you talk about what you were seeing, what your experiences were on the ranch that really impacted your wider view.
Yeah, to get really, really personal, I was conceived in a forest.
Oh
I know the exact location where the deed happened. I showed it to my children. My mom showed it to me, I showed it to my children.
Oh my God.
No, it was, this is where, it's so interesting how the formative years of one's life keep on repeating and repeating as one continues going decade after decade. But this is where I learned all my value system. And it's really from the concept that my narrow pathways make me think what not growing up in a city, which, by the way, just as my mother would say, there's assholes in the city and there's assholes in the country. So let's just be clear. Nothing's better than the other. But it's just, I have very formative years understanding that we are part of nature. So whatever happens in the exterior is happening to our interior. It's a complete mirror. So, but I learned about long-term view and sustainability, about things that have to be made to last because they need to endure. And I would sit in my grandmother's chairs. And craft had a place there. We would make our own wool blankets from the sheep. We would make our own soap. Everything was circular. The farm, my mom still lives there, off the grid, pre-industrial practices. And I learned everything there. So yes, it's my DNA, and that's the practices that I'm not revolutionary. I'm just using patterns from the past, learning what I learned in a ranch, farming values.
I think that's beautiful, and I love that you're taking these sort of learnings and experiences from the past and using it to build a sustainable brand of the future. I've read interviews with you in the past, and you talked about how you really want to become the luxury brand of the future. And so, to you, what does that look like?
I think when I go to work, I think with privilege comes responsibility, and I come from a developing nation. And so when I go to work, I always think of what's going on between the tropics and the reality that people are living for the way we live in the North and the privileges we have and the comforts that we have. I mean, we would have light at night from a generator that would be an hour. So it was a bloop, 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 and then it's like, that's it. And so I've learned to live in these two worlds, right? This experience has been so rich to me, but I have to go to work thinking the realities of others and thinking that because of climate and conflict, we're going to be looking into 125 million refugees, 50% of them being children, over 450 million people living in, children living in conflict zones. So I can't create without knowing those realities. I can't create knowing the impact that certain fibers like cotton will make to our biodiversity. I can't know unknown what I know. So that's really what I do for work, and I love creating beauty. And I was speaking earlier about this, we think that creativity, if you narrow creativity to what's best for the environment, you think it will become weaker, but it's actually stronger. You don't sacrifice anything. You can go to a store, you won't sacrifice the fact that we don't have window displays or mannequins that you will still have a luxury experience. My team will treat you the same if you're gonna buy the whole store or you're gonna buy nothing, if you just wanna learn. So I think those are the values that will matter in the future, because we're walking into a harsh reality. I think we're not a suicidal species, but the realities are going to get harsh as the natural resources come harder and harder.
And so I'd like to revisit the subject of materials and cotton in a little bit. But I'd like to talk to you, Caroline, about the work that the BFC is doing. I believe it's next week. You have your the IPF's Sustainability Forum coming up.
We do. So it's our 4th annual Institute of Positive Fashion Forum. And the idea really is to bring together the British fashion community and some experts from international markets to really come and share knowledge. So we have some fantastic keynotes from Brunello Cucinelli talking about sustainable communities and regenerative farming. But equally, we also bring together our members and patrons and sustainability experts to think about hacks. So collectively, how can we collaborate on some of the big challenges that our industry is facing? Because I think the way the fashion industry used to operate is that it was very much, you'd have your brand, you'd think about what you were doing, you wouldn't share knowledge, suppliers, anything. And sustainability and the environment has really brought together the industry in terms of opening up their contacts book, thinking about how they can do things differently, sharing case studies and pilots. So it's a fantastic opportunity, and it's a really incredible day. So if any of you aren't coming yet but would like to come, let us know, because you come out of it really inspired, because you see how much the industry is already trying to tackle. And I think, when we think about the challenges around sustainability in fashion, sometimes it's a bit overwhelming. But actually, when you talk to the practitioners, to the designers and brands, and understand the work that's happening, then you become really inspired by it. And we've got some really exciting programs we're updating around low carbon transition programs for young businesses. If you're a big business, you have big resources, you're able to tap into those. But for our younger designers, is that having these programs is really important. And we'll also be talking about a program we kicked off in September, which is called our Circular Fashion Innovation Network. And that came to be because we spent a couple of years looking at what sort of the target state ecosystem would look like, what the blueprint is for that, what the pathways are to get there. And this is about action. It's how does the industry come together to collaborate, to really think about those blockers, and to think about other stakeholders. As you said, what's the role of government in this? What's the role of NGOs, of innovators, and really think about that holistic view. So can't wait to share all of that next week. It's a really, really exciting day, and it's sort of a mark in the sand in terms of where the British fashion industry is in terms of sustainability.
I loved your point about collaboration and that idea of the collective, because it really is, you know, it has to be a real sort of group effort. You know, there really can't be that sense of like this belonging to one brand or the other. It really does have, you know, it requires a community of people to really get behind it. So the BFC is working on a 10-year strategy to help the industry reduce its climate impact in line with UN goals. And so I'd love to hear your views on how you think the British fashion industry is tracking against these goals.
Well, what we saw was a lot of the bigger brands, of course, setting targets for 2030 and 2050. And what happened was sort of the low-hanging fruit was tackled first, as it should be, to sort of get your house in order. But the bigger challenges around Scope 3, around challenges in the supply chain, really needs collaboration. And that's where the Circular Fashion Innovation Network actually comes together to help bring together the bigger players in the industry to sit around the table, to have some quite gnarly discussions about, you know, where people will step up, and really to think about what that programme to accelerate the industry, well, the UK fashion industry, to that circularity view is. And of course, we understand that while we're thinking about circular ecosystems here, it's an industry that has supply chains across the world. So, you know, there's a lot of thought around how that's going to impact. So if we're looking at reshoring, the impact that that might have in terms of incredible factories that we're working with in many different regions. And I think that came to life for me. I just came back from India, from an incredible factory in Pondicherry that is, you know, 80% women, who had an incredible story that they were actually working on a program for us. Can you remember the face masks we had during the pandemic, designed by the young British designers? They were literally everywhere, raised $500,000 for our charity. And these women would only have been able to work and feed their families because we had this program that was about creating face masks for the pandemic. They had to get special permission to operate. And it became really acutely aware of the impact that our industry has in terms of providing lifelines for quite often women in countries in really quite difficult conditions. So, you know, all of that is front of mind when we're thinking about the programme. But in terms of tracking, it's difficult from an industry perspective, but it is one of the things. I'm looking at our team who's in the room. We're trying to figure out actually how we can baseline now and start to track along that, because what we want to do is show that the industry is making progress, because as businesses are reporting on it, it incentivizes them to do more. So having those targets and being able to measure against it is really important.
Yeah, because we simply just don't know very much, like, about how much people are actually really producing. So Gabriela, you know, decades of efforts to cut carbon emissions have failed to significantly slow the rate of global warming, which we're all, you know, well aware of. I'd like to talk about your views on fusion energy, which I had never heard of until I heard you do a talk with the Wall Street Journal, if I'm not mistaken. So you went to COP27 and COP28 to talk very passionately about why we should all be paying attention to fusion energy. And I'd love it if you could, you know, explain
yes,
to
but
our audience here.
We'll talk about fusion, which is my passion, to talk about fusion. But I think it's what Caroline said is the real elements of constructing a garment, which is who is making your product and where are the ingredients and the fibers that you're making the product. And that's the difference between. And so who is making are you involving enough social components? Are you social work that can go into your production, and the fibers? Then we need the verticality and transparency needs to come as soon as possible. Even as we were a small team, we did digitalize everything because we knew that it was going to be easier to do it at the beginning than later. But going to fusion, it took me to the journey from, as sustainability is a journey. No one's born knowing. It's like I compare it to any practice. The more you do it, the more you want to learn it. And it's good to start with the low-hanging fruit because it gives you power and it gives power to your team. But at the end of the day, I can be talking to CEOs of multi-billion-dollar companies, famous ones, big ones, and at the end of the day, we're talking about energy. Sustainability is an energy issue. We're moving our world 80% on fossil fuel. The idea that we're going to consume less energy, it's not realistic. And I was mentioning what climate injustice is. why the countries that are doing the less for the consumption of energy, why can't they have infrastructures? Why can't they have hospitals? Do you want to see creative magicians go to an NGO in any of the developing nations and what they can do to bring the supplies? So I started to realize there was an energy, and I read an article in 2021 about fusion in the Financial Times. Sorry, competitor publication, but it just really was, my brain went whoop, because I realized that it was something that we were going through since the Cold War, but the private sector was finally getting into it. And when I started to see the private sector investing heavily in it, and all the big players that you may know were in it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I was like, okay, so this has potential. And so just to explain it, so we have fossil fuels here. We have intermittent energies that we love, like solar, wind power, and we need a scope of energy. There's nuclear that has bad PR. I have nothing against nuclear. We could have clean energy right now, but just nuclear has bad PR. And then we have hydrogen, and while fusion is not commercially able yet, the US government and the EU, it's already working bureaucratically. They already know how they're going to regularize it for the future. So we did a show for Chloe on fusion on 2022, where at the beginning people were like, what are you talking about, fusion food? And then there was the breakthrough from Lawrence. And really what fusion is, I'll just be more graphic about it, is fission, which is the nuclear that everybody knows, and then you have fusion, which is you fuse the isotopes of hydrogen. So this is what's so amazing. With a glass of fusion fuel like this, you can power a house for 800 years, and it doesn't use uranium. So the idea that you can actually de-weaponize energies is quite remarkable, and it gives me so much hope, because I meet so many young geniuses, like head of tokamaks, engineers, physicians, that are putting themselves, their brains, into saving us. And that's why I feel a responsibility to tell people the good news as much as possible, because we're not just, there's a trend now to move away from sustainability, so I'm very glad that we're participating here. You're seeing it in the business community. It's not only in fashion that there's kind of a push, but this is the time that we need to be more assertive about it, because the world is just getting warmer. And no pun intended, but pedal to the metal. And so really, fusion has the ability to, even the guys that want to go to Mars in one-way ticket, they're going to need, fusion in the rockets. And so it has the ability to really solve the big dependency that we have in fossil fuel. It's not the only solution, but it's one of them. And so I feel the responsibility to tell people what I know. And I am not an investor, I'm not a politician, and I'm not a scientist. So I am there as a mother that sees a chance. So people should not take the last drink at the bar and think, it's okay. Mm-hmm. So it's like, no, it's worth preserving.
I think your story is quite a fascinating one, because you've driven change from the two poles of the fashion industry, in terms of building your own namesake label, and also you've worked at a very large luxury house, and like thinking through to this audience, we have a range of attendees, CEOs, but also designers, like business owners, who kind of really sit on the complete spectrum of the industry. So I'd love to hear some of the sort of key learnings and takeaways that you've accrued over
Yes.
your experience so far.
Why I was so passionate about taking the Chloe project was because we've done 7 years of research and development at GH, where we had a growing business. We had LVMH just invested in us. We were a partnership. We were solid, growing, controlled growth, looking at a way to construct a business with long-term view, and again, farm mentality. We had experiences where we could have grown really quickly, where our Nina bag had every single store in the world wanted it, but I was cornered, and I would say, nope, we're not gonna do this. And we controlled the hit, and we built our retail chain through it. So we will demand people, and instead of putting the bags in the front, how everybody does it, we put it all the way on the back, so you had to walk through the store, stuff here. We made it really difficult in the sense that it was all manual. You had to basically if you really wanted it, you had to work for it. And so we built the business in that way of not selling out, to really build it solid. And then it really grew into, okay, we learned how to manage this business. We learned how to open stores without window displays, without all the excesses. We learned how to create luxury without cutting. We learned about packaging. Can we rapidly put this in a because we're a small business, but could we put it in a larger business? And Chloe was in the perfect situation because they were looking for change, right? Change only happens when many people want it. And by the way, anything Gabriela, Hearst, or Chloe is open source. So all the knowledge is there. But immediately you can change the materiality, the packaging. And it was a really experience. There was one person heading sustainability and licensing, and I was like, that's not gonna work. So then it was just one person in sustainability, and by the time I left, there were 13 people, so I was really proud of that. And there's a lot of things that we're able to do. The regulations that now are applied in the EU, Chloe was applying it before. The group of very solid, dedicated team members that drive that change, and you could do it. You can actually do it and grow the business, because that's the key part. The business actually grew 65% better.
Yeah, so I'd like to talk about the financial upsides of sustainability as well, but also quite interesting to see how quickly you grew, the sustainability, like those on the team who are focused on that specifically, like that team. I think that's quite interesting.
You need the workforce to do it, right?
Yes, yeah. And then, but I've heard a lot of younger emerging designers talk about the barriers that they encounter to building sustainable brands. And so I'd like to ask you both advice that you'd give to those sort of brands of a certain level who find it quite difficult or expensive.
I can talk from my experience, which in a way, when we used dead stock for the first time, it was kind of a dirty word. You're using dead stock, repurpose. It wasn't, and now it's a common practice, but there wasn't recycled cotton, there wasn't recycled cashmere. All those things are available now at a lower cost. So yes, you have to sacrifice things, right? Steph and I, we still do the social media for Gabriela Hearst. It's a horrible job, but everyone in my team is committed to doing an amazing product. So we all gonna do 5 jobs. So there is sacrifices you have to do, but what are the priorities? So the will is there, and in certain ways it's easier.
And Caroline, what about you?
Well, as you know, we've got a brilliant raft of young designers, actually some that have been practicing for probably over 15 years, but it's really only just starting to be seen and recognised, who are just challenging the way traditional fashion industry runs, whether it's using dead stock fabric or, mechanically taking apart garments and re-engineering them, to, just rethinking around sort of adornment as a way of sort of being able to really think about re-energizing pre-loved clothes. And the challenge for them is really then how do they think about growing that business? And that does come down to the cost of materials. Dead stock fabric is more affordable. Recycled fabric is actually less accessible because of the minimum. So I think there's opportunities through the work that we're doing to really think about bringing together, mini cooperatives maybe to collectively buy to reach the minimums. So again, it comes back to collaboration. And actually, what we're seeing is that a lot of these designers are sharing their stories with each other, figuring out, there's WhatsApp groups where everyone's sharing suppliers, etc. And the interesting bit is that I've been in this industry long enough. It used to be at the British Fashion Council where big business would come and mentor small businesses and show them how to grow. What's happening now is that the new independent businesses are going into big business and challenging them on the way that they're doing business and showing them how they can do things differently. So the industry is changing remarkably. Unfortunately, they're being paid for that by the bigger business. So that's helping sometimes fund the overheads and the additional costs that come from really thinking about a sustainable business.
That's a really great point. And I guess for those bigger brands and businesses who are in positions to sort of encourage that kind of reverse mentoring, I think that's a really good takeaway to sort of keep in mind as people leave today. I'd like to talk for a bit about Fashion Month, which is such a hugely powerful platform that we have in our industry. You know, it's a powerful communication channel. It drives headlines. It drives massive amounts of social engagement. And we've seen, you know, talk of sustainability rise and dip again. And so maybe, you know, I'd like to start with you, Caroline, to get your views on what brands can and should be doing to sort of drive greater awareness of, you know, the need for commitment to sustainability, how they can use this platform.
There is. A London Fashion Week tends to be, of course, it's a platform to show your next collection, but more and more it also becomes a platform for people to talk to consumers, to talk to the industry. As you know, we have quite often protests around Fashion Week, or activists that are wanting to tell their stories. And quite often we will encourage that. We will invite the activists in to come and have that conversation, and sometimes facilitate that with an industry audience as well. Because it's, as you said, it's a really powerful communications moment. And for us at the British Fashion Council, we will use that in the messaging to industry at the beginning of the week as an opportunity within interviews to talk about sustainability, to talk about the cohort of designers that are really challenging the way our industry is doing business. And actually, as a way of really thinking about influencing consumer behavior, which is, we know is one of the challenges that we're up against in terms of really changing the way that our industry operates, is that it is a fantastic communication channel for that, because it means that magazines across the board, newspapers, influencers, designers, everybody can use their channel to tell that story.
It's true. And I think, Gabriela, you know, your shows have been such a brilliant testament to this, and I'd love to hear you talk a bit about the ways that you've used your shows to really shine a light on, you know, where fashion's values should be.
Yeah, we test it. There's a word that encompasses for us is efficiency, right? A fashion show is a very expensive thing to do, and you're a small brand. You have to justify why you're doing a fashion show. So we've measured it. We measured the media input, while we create the content. You know, we show it to the board. We get a lot of content, but it's not only what you create as the image, but also what is the message. What you have. I always admire people that use whatever limelight they have to focus on others. So at Chloe, what we did in the last 4 seasons were to do what we believe was climate success. The 4 main points for me, which were regenerative conservation, the first one. Second one, clean, abundant energy, fusion. Women empowerment, because nothing is going to happen without more female ambassadors and leaderships and presidents. So women empower now, today. And then a change of consciousness of how we think. And so that's the messages. And in Gabriela, Hearst is whatever is inspiring in the moment of where I am right now, in what I see. And I really, in the journey of trying to remind people that for millennia we were praying to goddesses, to women. So for me, I say thank goddess. And so I really, has to be a shift in our brain, and I value efficient business more than big business, because I've said this today. I've sat with CEOs that telling me we sell 100,000. No, we produce 100,000, products. These big numbers, and my brain is going like, how many are you selling? Mm-hmm. So it's like the honesty and the transparency that needs to happen. We see the increases of prices on luxury products in luxury brands, and even if a woman can afford it, no woman with any budget wants to be, ripped off. Mm. So there's a transparency and honesty that needs to happen more in our industry, because we see those revenues grow up and they're more on the value side. So.
Also, I love your point about centering women, because I think it's worth pointing out that the climate crisis is definitely widening the gender gap, and it's, it will impact women more than anyone.
Like everything, yeah.
Yeah. So I'd love to get both your views on the financial upsides of, centering sustainability and one's business model.
Well, I think the obvious one is that if you maximize utilization of resources, then you're saving money.
Yeah.
So things like overproduction, waste through design and production, are big issues for the industry to tackle. And I think, when we think about circularity, we're also thinking about, the amount of product that maybe doesn't even make it to the shop floor. And in, the most disheartening thing, I think, through conversations with some of the high street retailers is where they're factoring in a 40% discount into the price point because they know it's going to go on sale, and that some of it is just never going to make it to the shop floor. So there is a big shift in the industry that needs to be made, and I think if you keep that front of mind, that you're maximizing, how you use the resources, and we really think about forecasting, which of course to do accurately is impossible, but really just think about, the forecasting and merchandising, and we've got fantastic tools now, AI and data that we'll be able to use to really think about, challenging the way it's been done in the past. I think will really help us to do better in the future. So I'm hopeful for that.
And, on that note, so France is pressing ahead with a game-changing bill that would impose a sin tax-style penalty on fast fashion products as high as €10 per item by 2030. And so I'd like to ask you both, I'd love to start with you, Gabriela, on sort of legislation that you'd love to see, legislative changes you'd love to see taking place, and in the UK and the US to start, since this is,
I think the EU has a very strong model that they in fashion of what's the regulations on greenwashing, and I think that there is a blueprint that is already happening that's a bit more advanced in the EU that we could imprint. I do think that the reality is that they can be put out of business. I see the young generation buying more vintage and vintage. We had a group of students from USC come to our studio, and they asked always the question of fast fashion and what are we going to do about fast fashion? So I asked them, it was around 25 people, students, and I said, okay, so how many of you buy fast fashion? And two went like this. And I'm like, how many of you buy vintage or secondhand, like our ambassador? And everybody put their hands up. So I think there's a way there to choose with your dollars as well. And I think the generation, we have to give faith to this generation that's coming up, because they really know what's going on. And to young designers, I've never had a young designer meeting that I don't leave inspired. You're always supposed to be, oh, here's the mentor, and it's like you always feel invigorated. So it's at this moment we're guardianships, and we're holding the fort for them because the world is theirs, it's not ours.
Yes, it's so true. I'm looking at the clock. There's so much I want to squeeze into this the time that we have left. I'd like to talk about materials briefly. It's been a big news week on that front. And so I think, Gabriela, I think you've done a lot of really interesting work with materials in terms of like innovation, but also reusing things like dead stock fabrics, pieces of Turkish rugs, but also like really innovative things like silver lining that like protects cell phone radiation from reaching women's reproductive organs, like really impressive stuff. So I'd love to hear you talk about like what is exciting you the most in that area right now.
Well, it starts from the fact that I love women. I love dressing women, I love framing women, I love empowering them. It's just by just contributing because I know the power of dressing. I wouldn't be a designer if I didn't know you can change perceptions with that. But the materials that we use, when it comes to energy, I like to focus in the future, but when it comes to materials, I like to look at our history and our past. In Roman times, we used to dress with 3 materials: linen, leather, and wool. And those are really reliant materials. I love linen over cotton because you can eat the flaxseed, has a nutritional value. It uses much less, it uses really little water. It doesn't use herbicides and pesticides. It's not part of the monocrop. So linen was always a part of our materials, and then wool is, I love wool. This I can be biased because I'm a merino sheep producer, but it's, I know the durability. I think our oldest garment that we have in our history is 8,000 years old wool. So materials always looking at the past and limiting yourself to what you can create. I find it really invigorating. I don't think this array of like, let's just go crazy. It actually focuses your creativity.
Well, I'm wearing, your linen, and I think your linen is very soft. And we were just saying earlier, you said Americans don't like a scratchy, itchy fabric, and I can attest to that.
No, they don't like scratchy. They don't like scratchy. And so when Solviati, which is not this one that you're using, this one's another one that's softer, but Solviati, which is now owned by Loro Piana, but it's an old linen producer. Europe has really good linen, by the way. And the Solviati did a linen that was treated with aloe. They still do it, and we still use it. And it makes it so soft, and it moisturizes your skin. And the moment, this is like 2018, Steph was with me, I went bananas. I went to bed, I wanted to do sheets, pajamas, everything. And I'm like, finally we have the linen for the Americans. We got this. But yes, materials, and putting the cell phone, the anti-radiation, a doctor had told me, don't put your phones in the front, just, this is many years ago. So I'm like, and then I was looking for a material that can protect the silver lining on the pockets, so you can put your cell phone, protecting our women is my job.
No, I think it's incredible and fascinating, and also just really exciting, to see the change afoot in that area. And for you here, Caroline, and just having a more macro view of what's happening within the British fashion industry, are there any sort of innovations that you've seen that you find particularly exciting right now in the materials and textiles space?
Yeah, there's a lot of innovation that's happening, isn't there, around use of sort of food waste, so pineapple leathers and, banana leathers and, various different vegan leathers. And those are really exciting, but the challenge around them is scalability at the moment. And of course, weighing up, the energy intensity to create them. So it's early days, but it's really exciting to know that there will be sort of new materials that we can use. Are also quite expensive at the moment, which is where I do think the government can help with, incentives or tax breaks to really help some of this innovation to really be able to scale. But I also love the innovation that's happening around, respinning fibres. So when things are recycled and the fibres are broken down, being able to respin them and think about sort of building the durability of these fibres so that they can create new textiles. Because, if you think about how much product we already have made, the opportunity to be able to create that into new fibres and new textiles seems an obvious one to really think about protecting the planet.
So, we are running out of time, and I wanted to sort of end by asking you questions that sort of are kind of aside from business and just, about you two as women, because I think when we think about the climate crisis, it's such a, it's a lot to wrap your heads around, but it's also a lot to process emotionally. And Gabriela, I read an interview with you in which you said that a part of your way of sort of coping with it and sort of preserving your sense of hope is that you just keep journaling and writing the phrase climate success, like trying to manifest and visualize what you want to see happen. So I'd like to just ask you both about how, like, what gives you hope? How do you maintain it? Like, how do you grab hold of it and maintain a sense of hope when we're constantly being met by headlines that are, increasingly terrifying?
Scientists, brilliant minds give me hope. The young minds give me hope. The human spirit give me hope, because at the end of the day, I believe that we're not just the brain, our bodies. There's something about us that the ingenuity of, we get into trouble, sometimes in the name of convenience, but there's something about us that it's worth preserving, and I know that we are not a suicidal species. But what really gives me hope is the fact that I see in this very challenging time a huge opportunity for change. And again, there's a lot of responsibility in our shoulders because it's not fair to give it to the young generation to deal with. And every time there's a cheap option of a lower price from X company, you know that somebody else is picking up the bill now or in that generation. So just the consciousness of how we are treating each other from a business and personal way is the same for me.
Caroline, what about you?
I think, humanity front and centre, I think, is that the idea that that as individuals that we will do the right thing at some point in time. But on a daily basis, it is the stories that I'm hearing from within the industry. I feel like I've been in this industry for quite a while. And when I speak to my peers, is that we feel actually that we've been part of the problem. We were through this sort of amazing period where it was about access, it was about growth, it was about, talking to the consumer, it was about delivery within half an hour to your door, and, order 10 things, keep one, send the rest back, all of that. And I think is that there's an opportunity and responsibility to really think about helping change that narrative and to bring together the expertise that there is already to accelerate what's happening, so we're not duplicating and piloting what's already been done over there, to take those learnings and going, right, how can we run with that? I think when you've been in the industry and you have this sort of network and community around you, we're in a place where we can make that happen. And so it's the stories of the individuals that are doing that that give me hope.
I think that's a very hopeful note to end on. Thank you so much for this conversation. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Like about 5 minutes.
I know, it flew by.